a sound off right here. Okay, Nick, I think we're ready to start. Are you ready? All right, everybody's ready. We're going to begin with Pledge of Allegiance, and Jennifer Gravitt is going to come in and give that for us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Jennifer. Okay, welcome everyone. Just a few housekeeping things as we get ready to start. So my name is Amber Bonner. I am the Education Commissioner for Utah PTA, and I will be the moderator this evening. The Utah Education Debate Coalition has been in place for about 10 years that we've been doing these USBE debates. This is our 4th debate so far this year. The Debate Coalition recognized the challenge candidates for State Board of Education have faced in communicating with the public and their visions and what they would like to do. And so to help address that problem, that's why the coalition came together and has been inviting candidates to participate in now what has been scores of debates over the last 10 years. In a few instances, for various reasons, candidates have chosen not to participate, but we have decided to hold those anyway so that more information can be available to the public. To ease the conversations, anyway, so this year is no different. We're still doing that this year. This round of debates that we have been doing is for races where there is a primary election. The members of the Education Debate Coalition include the Hinckley Institute of Politics from the University of Utah, the Sutherland Institute, the Utah PTA, the Utah Association of Public Charter Schools, United Way of Salt Lake, and also the Deseret News. So just a few housekeeping things. For the debate, we will start with an opening statement from each candidate that will run for 60 seconds. Then we will ask a series of questions for the first half hour that we have prepared ahead of time. The candidates were not given the questions yet, but the coalition prepared those questions. So they will have 90 seconds to respond to those, and then if needed, 30 seconds for a rebuttal. Does that sound good? Okay. That will be the first 30 minutes. In the second 30 minutes, we will take questions from the audience and also from people that are watching the live stream on home. So I have some of those questions already. Thank you, audience members here in person. And then we have someone who will be sending me questions from the online audience. We are currently live streaming this debate. So one help that we really need from the in-person audience is we don't want a lot of audience noise that can be distracting for the online viewers. And also we are recording this. So it will be posted pretty much immediately onto the Hinckley Institute's YouTube channel, sorry. So it will be there for people to watch. Okay, any questions from either of you? If you can turn off the sound, great. If you can't, I think it's okay. I'm not hearing from Nick that it's an issue. So hopefully that's, anyway, so, okay. Let me just make sure I covered all of the pertinent things. Okay, I think we did. So this will run about an hour. We're hoping to keep right on time. So, okay. First, we're going to start with an opening statement. And I, like many of you, realized that I don't carry coins. So we did not flip a coin. But Brent, you're closest to me. We'll have you start. That's okay. Oh, also for the candidates, Leah right here in the front will be timekeeper for you. She will give you a 60-second notice, and then she'll tell you when your time is. And I think a 10-second notice. Yes. And then she'll tell you when your time is complete.
Thank you. Theodore Roosevelt said, far and away the best prize that life has to offer is the chance to work hard at work worth doing. I have had the privilege and opportunity to work in education for 34 plus years. And first 30 were as an educator, as a teacher of social studies and history. And that brought me great joy. It was a satisfaction to be in the classroom and to grow with the students. I would still be there today if it hadn't been for this position, because I love this so much. But the time on the board takes a great deal, and I felt I was cheating my students. Just last week, in 2 days, we had 26 hours of meetings. And I have to say I was exhausted, but it is a joy to serve. Thank you.
My name is Rob Hall. Of course, I'm running for State School Board District 3. My purpose for running is to help protect and preserve the hearts and minds of Utah students. And I believe that what goes into the mind impacts the heart. What impacts the heart comes out in a person's life. These are the most precious and pliable minds, and I believe that they need to be protected. I'm a father of 5. I've been married for almost 26 years. I got 2 beautiful grandbabies. I've been a youth pastor for the last 25 years, working with 12-year-olds all the way up to 30-year-olds, and then some. I was also a teacher for 10 years, working with junior high and high school. I'm currently now an honorary wing commander for the 380 Fighter Wing up on the Hill Air Force Base, working with the 421 FGS, young men and women between the ages of 18 to 25 years old. I'm also currently a chaplain from Salt Lake City PD. And I'm praying for the opportunity to be able to serve the people of this great state on the Board of Education.
Okay, so we're going to jump right into the questions that were prepared by the Debate Coalition. And Rod, we'll start with you answering first for this first question, since Brent started with our statement. So the first question is, what will be your guiding principles for decision-making on the State Board of Education?
I do want to say unashamedly that I'm a Christian. And so my principles and my values are a part of who I am. Based upon that. And so those will be my guiding principles. But I do want to say this as well. We're going to be working with teachers. We're going to be working with students. We're going to be working with parents to find out the input that we need to find out to make decisions that need to be made on the board. So when we do come to a place where there's an impasse and we just can't make a decision, I'll use those principles, those guiding principles in my life to help make those decisions.
Thank you. I'm also a man of faith. I hold that dear and hold it in here. And I just have to say that I have to recognize my wonderful wife. We were actually married on the 201st anniversary of the Constitution being ratified. So that wasn't on purpose, but it worked out well. And we have 7 lovely children. But my guiding principles are everything that Rod said, as well as I really want to focus on parental engagement, academic excellence, teacher advocacy, and transparency and accountability. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, question 2, and Brent, we'll start with you for this one. So recently, the USBE is the Utah State Board of Education, decided that questions about restrooms and gender should be left up to schools to decide on a case-by-case basis. Do you agree with this decision?
Yes, and I'll have to say also that I serve on the High School Activities Association, and all of the laws that have been passed by the legislature, we have put those in place, and we continue to move the requirements of the legislature along. Thank you.
I think with all the changes to Title IX, I think it's important that that's a top-down issue. That there's some guidance from the top down. I think to leave that in the court of local school districts, with the possibility of being sued, with the possibility of having large groups together, when they can just simply say, you know what, we're following the state law, the state rule. I think that's a whole lot better. So even clear to the AG to be able to have their back. I think it's important that we have a law or a rule that comes all the way from the top down to be able to cover that issue. That's a very sensitive issue. I think it should come from the top down.
And then Mrs. Ray, would you like to read that?
Yeah, thank you. I just want to make the point that we worked through the Title IX issues for several hours last week, and I'm satisfied with where we're at in regards to giving some guidance to the legislature on what they want us to do. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, question number 3, and Rod, we'll have you start with this one. This one is, what does equity mean to you and what does it not mean?
Equity it's a tricky word now. It used to be a tricky word, but it is. Equity is not equal opportunity. Equity is equality of outcomes. And you can't get equality of outcomes in your own house with your own kids, let alone in a school full of people. And so I think it could be a very dangerous word the way that it's used nowadays. And I think it's pitched plenty in our schools. I know that even in Davis County and RR, there's equity being taught to the teachers over the summer. And I just think it's one of those things we really need to try to steer clear of. There's no such thing as equal outcomes. The only way you get equal outcomes is to lower the bar for everyone. And that is not great excellence. So we want to really steer away from that word. I'm all about equal opportunity. Everybody gets a shot at it, but they get what they get. They get what they put into it. Equal equity says equality of outcomes. That means they lower the bar so everybody kind of gets the same way.
So equity has been a word that we've worked with a lot lately. And during the legislative session, I was right there in the middle of the meetings to work on House Bill 261 to adopt the bill. We worked on it during the actual work of that was still in the legislature, still being debated, and we worked hard on that. I would disagree in one essence. Every student is unique. Every student has their own set of challenges. Every student needs something to help them reach their full potential, and every student is different. And how we get there is very important. So we're not looking for equality of outcomes. We're looking to meet the needs of every single student, every single day, and to help them become what they can be. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, our next question is, this year, public education has the possibility of some significant funding changes with 2 different amendments, constitutional amendments that will be on our ballot in November. Do you believe that our K-12 schools are adequately funded, and what is your position on those amendments?
So I was right in the middle of this as well. And I have some very strong feelings and about this. And my thoughts are a little bit different than many of my colleagues that I respect very much. But one of the things I absolutely support, especially for families in the state of Utah, is the elimination of the state's portion of the sales tax on food. There will still be some sales tax on food because local revenues for local cities is dependent on that. But I support that. I also support the change in the Constitution because there still is the mandate for the legislature to maintain public education. And I think there's still enough push from the people that will occur, and that will occur very well. I think the legislature very much wants to meet the needs of education. And in reality, we have no money without the legislature. They are entrusted by the voters to provide that. And that is very important that they do. But one thing I'm going to go over just a tiny bit here. When it comes to the constitutional element, we are only as good as our legislators and their desire to meet the needs of schools. Because if they don't give us the money, they can do a tax cut. The money is not ours. We're dependent on them. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Rod.
Other than saying, I have a question. Are our schools adequately funded? I think we all need to stop and ask ourselves this question: how is the money being spent that we currently have in our schools? We're talking about the 2nd largest budget in the state. I think now up over $8 billion. And if you were to sit down and ask people you really would have to corral a bunch of people into one room to find out how this money is being spent. There's so many different buckets that the money's being allocated to. And one of the things that I want to commit to if I get on the state school board is that I will sit down with these people as elected official and find out how this money is being spent. I don't think that we can make a decision on if we're adequately funded unless we know how the monies are being spent in our schools, and nobody seems to be able to give an answer about how that money is being spent.
Okay, next question. There's a tension between various levels of educational governance. You know, you start at the classroom level with the teacher, you move to the principal, you move to the local school board, then the state school board, and even the legislature. Discussions about whether decisions for schools should be made from a top-down basis or a bottom-up basis are occurring pretty regularly. So which issues, standards, curricula do you think should be addressed in these different areas? What things do you think the state board should be addressing? What things do you think local boards should be addressing? Those types of items. Maybe there are things that should be addressed right down to the teacher should be the one making that decision. So Rod, I think we have you going first.
I think that the school board's got some things in place right now that give great guidance as far as policy and rules, pass down to the local districts, be able to implement those things on the local level. And then of course you have teachers and you have parents involved in that process to be able to hold things in check. I do want to say I don't think there's nearly enough transparency there. I don't think there's enough accountability there, but that's maybe for another day. But those things, that process is there for a reason. I do think there's some big things that need to come from the top down. I spoke about one already earlier, the stuff dealing with Title IX and girls in sports and the restrooms, but also sensitive materials issue too as well. These are big issues I believe that need to come from the top down.
Well, in regards to sensitive materials, that's actually changed quite a bit between last year and this year. There is going to be more direction top down. I don't think local entities fell. I believe in the system of local control in most instances. Basically, the role of everything is that the legislature is to maintain our schools and to fund them, and they give us guidance. We then take that guidance. The guidance that they give us is a law. And one of the big things that happens when people ask me questions about education is we get that mixed up. We think somehow that the State Board of Education makes laws. We don't. For example, sensitive materials, the legislature gave all of the guidance, and then we implemented that guidance in the way that they wished to have it implemented. Now, in this instance, they did ask the Attorney General's office to give their input to the state board, and then we made a model policy, and the districts then did their own policy. And for the most part, there hasn't been a ton. Probably the district with the most is 113 currently that have been reviewed in Davis County. But I believe in local control. We make the standards at the state level. We make the rules of education, and then they implement those at the local level. Thank you.
The state school board is a constitutional body, and they have the power to act. They have the power to pass down rules, especially on an issue like sensitive materials, which along the way they've been kicking that can down the road. And HB 59 came along, and that's what kind of spurred them to do what they did this last weekend, and beginning to make a decision in that direction. And the legislator should have never had to step into that situation. Anytime you see the legislator step into a situation with the school board, it is an act, it is a vote of no confidence in the state school board.
I have to disagree. We absolutely, with complete fidelity, met the demands of the legislature in developing that initial model policy. The suggestion by anyone that somehow the State Board of Education fell is not true. That is not true. We did exactly as we were asked to. And to make this a political platform, is taking advantage of what people think the truth is instead of what the actual truth is. Thank you.
Next question. What should be the goal of state testing? Is that goal being reached currently, do you think, with the current testing we're doing? And is it good that parents are then able to opt out their child out of testing if we're trying to reach a goal? And I think Mr. Straight.
I have very, very strong feelings on this. And one of the things that I want to say about testing is that that test does not make it better for students. In other words, if it does not inform instruction, then the test is not valuable. It's not valuable to teachers if they cannot change that one element. That's one thing I love about what's being done in our elementaries with Acadians reading and Acadians math. We had a report on Acadians reading, and many schools are 20% higher than they were last year. But here's what makes the difference. And what makes the difference is the Acadians reading data is usable by teachers not tomorrow, not 6 weeks. It is due now. And they can work with their teams and they can work on those things and help students to progress. And that's why students are progressing so much in those programs. And we had it's called the Science of Reading. And the Science of Reading, we had that report there's a group of professors and others, advocates who are at Utah State, and they came and talked about the beauty of that system. We need to get to that in all areas in testing. Thank you.
I do think that testing is necessary. I think it needs to always be academic in nature. I think the reason why a parent would even want to opt out of a test is that sometimes those tests have things in them that don't have anything to do with academics. They're invasive questions that should not be asked of children, especially without the permission of parents. And so I do think it's necessary when it's academic in nature. I think it's good. I don't think we should test too often. I think sometimes when a young person is struggling with reading, especially, you're testing them every single week, not giving them enough time to truly improve before they take that test again. It just breeds failure to them time and time again. So I think it's necessary academically. I just think we need to be careful with what we're testing on.
So I think the question we have to really think about it is this is summative testing. And some of it is formative. And I talked about both. We have to separate between the two. The end of the year testing, that is summative. We also have formative assessment, and Acadians is more of a formative assessment than it is a summative. It does have summative elements. We do have beginning, middle, and end of year to where we monitor what's happening with those, but we have to really understand the different types of assessment.
Okay, thank you. Next question. So many ideas have been presented over the last several years about, sorry, I lost my place, the future of the state board. Some of those ideas have been changing the number of board members, having the members be appointed by the governor instead of elected, or maybe taking the positions back to being nonpartisan, removing the board entirely and having only a superintendent. All those things have been suggested. What do you think of these proposals? And do you think that changes are necessary in the makeup of or the election process for the USCE? And I think, Rod, you're first this time, right? Okay.
I don't think you can go to an appointed board. I think it's important that the people have a voice. And when you elect an official, the official should really care about what his constituents think. And it should be the voice of the people. And what happens if you get an elected board, you lose that voice. So I think it's very important that we keep an elected board on the State Board of Education. I think it's fine to have a partisan board because it gives you an idea where the person lands or where they stand, at least an idea of where they're planted when you're getting ready to vet them and find out what kind of a person they are. I also think it's important that we have an elected board because if somebody's on the state board and they're not doing the things that represent the people of their district or of this state, the values of this state, then I think it's time to vote somebody else in that will take a stand in those areas.
I've actually participated in all three elements of election of state board. In 12 years or 8 years ago, I was in when it was an open primary. The next time it was the middle of COVID, and that was the first time it was partisan. And now once we're again, this was much different because it's partisan after COVID. And I can tell you that there is nothing that has been more challenging for the board than going through COVID and all the political upheaval that came from that in many ways was unnecessary. Now, I have served in different capacities of government. I served for 12 years on the South Ogden City Council. Every single one of those elections was nonpartisan. We didn't think about the partisan view of how we get clean water into people's homes. We didn't think about the partisan view of how to collect garbage or any of the other services provided by cities. And that's right at the base level of government. Local school boards are also currently nonpartisan. They don't talk about, well, the Republican view on this book is this, Democrat view is this. It's not that way. We are a board. We institute the will of the legislature and the will of our constituents, but mostly we have a lot of responsibility to our state legislature. So I'm not sure exactly where it's going, but we need to think differently. We need to have the discussion. I don't have a firm grasp on what is better at this point.
Thank you. Okay, we're almost to our half-hour point, getting ready to switch, but I do have another question that I thought would be interesting to see what you think. So since COVID, schools have seen a significant rise in chronic absenteeism. Subsequently, students are often struggling to reach proficiency in the materials they're being taught. What possible tools could USBE employ to combat chronic absenteeism, and how do you think we could help address that issue? And Mr. Straight, I think you're next.
Yes, I don't know if anyone's heard of the Roy Cohn Project, but I'm telling you, they are making inroads. They have someone that knows every day who is gone from school, and they do something about it. That's the answer. Now, we need to support and give the tools from the state board. We need to give the tools to where they can react, to where they can use those tools to do several things, because it's not just chronic absenteeism. I actually have 5 things that I'm working on for the next session of the legislature. One is on chronic absenteeism, and the other is on student behavior. And those two things together, those are very, very important. Student behavior needs to be dealt with in a positive way, where we're helping children to grow. We're helping children to become someone new, to where they can become their full potential. And when I look at what we're doing, I worked with 2 representatives during the last legislative session to work on those 2 issues. And when it comes to behavior, one of the things that has to happen is you have to have a way of dealing with each one. And elementaries are wonderful at organization. They have tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3, and that has to do with behavior. It has to do with academics. It has to do with all the different elements of their education.
Well, also, would you lean a little bit forward when you talk? Because that will make your sound a little bit better for the online audience. Thank you.
This is it's a difficult one because there's many different circumstances that we could address here, but I'm gonna hit it from this standpoint. There are some young people that have issues that make it so that they're chronically absent. But for the most part, young people are chronically absent because they're allowed to be chronically absent. And there's literally no repercussions for their actions. And so when you can miss 180 days of school, I'm telling you the truth, and be passed on to the next grade, that's a problem. And so we need to incorporate some things into the system that would allow people to be held accountable for their actions, not just students, but when a kid can't move on because of their chronic absenteeism, it also impacts the parents. And I'm telling you what, it'll put people in gear if you do that.
30 seconds here.
I'm glad you brought up parents. Parents in our Constitution retain the fundamental right and duty to exercise primary control over the care, supervision, upbringing, and education of their children. Now, there is one rebuttable issue to that. That is assuming that the parent has the best interest of the child in mind. And that's what's happening in the Roy Cohn Project, is they are dealing with every single kid, helping them get to school and stay there and be engaged in learning.
Okay, thank you. All right, so at this point, we've been going for half an hour now, and so we are going to switch to some audience questions. It looks like we don't have any online questions yet, but our audience here in person has given us a whole slew of questions, so we'll see how many of those we can get through. So the first one I have here from an audience member is, and I think, Mr. Hall, I think you'll be first. As a teacher, we hear so much about SEL and DEI. Would you please tell us your definition of those two things and your belief on how these two programs or ideas should be implemented in our
SEL, and I'm just going to be brief with that one. I believe there's a lot of different ways that it's pitched, and especially in elementary school, a lot of great things about getting along and different things like that with kids, and all that's great. But that's helping build character, but I don't think we need to incorporate SEL to do that. I think you can tell kids to be kind. I think you can teach kids how to get along with other kids without it being SEL. At its core, if you go to CASEL's website, Tim Shriver, which comes here often to speak to our teachers, it's a transformative SEL. And I know that we say it's not in our schools, but then why do we have Tim Shriver come? It's made by CASEL. That's what it is. And I think we need to be careful. It's a very dangerous tool, especially as they begin to progress in one of the high grades. As far as DEI goes, I think anytime you incorporate a system into the schools that will divide people by race, it's a dangerous thing. I've been here since I was 10 years old. This is a beautiful place. Utah's a beautiful place, but there is an undercurrent of things that are going on. And I believe it's as a result of diversity, equity, and inclusion that's been incorporated into our schools. It's there right now, especially in Davis County schools because of the DOJ, where we would feel like we need to move a person up based upon the fact that they're a certain skin color, or condemn someone because they're a certain skin color, or make someone feel bad about that. So I think it's a very dangerous thing, and I don't think it has any place in our schools.
Yes, and as I look back through the last months, when we were dealing with this issue, when it comes to DEI, one of the things that really struck out to me was that at the university level, this idea that you have to have a certain way of thinking by turning in these DEI statements, I think that was wrong thinking. But when it comes to social emotional learning, yeah, I agree, and here's where I agree strongly with you, is that much of social emotional learning occurs naturally as students observe their teachers, as they observe and they're taught how to interact with one another. But there are some very intentional things that we can do that social emotional learning can be incredibly dynamic. When students are asked to write, SEL, we had a program, it's called Do the Right Thing, which is driven by English teachers throughout our state. And that is an excellent program to implement SEL and have students think about intentionally who they are. Also in my wife's elementary, where she's the principal, they use Leader in Me. Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Successful Students, young people, learning to be leaders, learning to adapt and understand the good things in this life, and to be good citizens. Be good citizens. That's what SEL is. Be a good citizen. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think
Oh,
we can do all that without SEL. I think that's important. We understand we can do all that without SEL. And if you dive into it, SEL's therapy. It's psychotherapy. And teachers are not therapists, they're teachers. And I think we need to make sure that our teachers don't take on a bigger load. let them do what they were called to do, which is to teach.
In 30 years, I've never seen a teacher act as a therapist. And the truth of the matter is that what I described is SEL. The 7 Habits of Highly Effective Students is SEL. It's a simple, basic thing. It does not have to be politicized into something it is not.
Thank you. I think this next question will start with Mr. Straight. I have a couple of questions here about your background. So what experiences do you have that suit you for this position? Things that are being mentioned are education experience, governmental experience, financial experience, and also experience with public schools. Who did your children attend, and what was that experience like?
In my time on both the state board and as well as in my service in South Ogden City, I've always got put on the finance committee. I always like to be in curriculum standards development. That's where I always wanted to be, and I spent 2 years there. But I spent a lot of time on the finance side. I also taught financial literacy in high school. I was a social studies and financial literacy teacher, and you know what? It is so exciting to teach a student about a Roth IRA and a 401k and how they can, and to help them understand the real cost of living so that when they're out of mom's and dad's house, when they finally kick them out of the basement, they can work through things a little bit better. And so I have a wealth of experience in all those areas, and I've enjoyed my service. Thank you.
So I do have a degree in education, and I do also have a degree in counseling too as well. But ultimately what we do is we help young people transition. It's coming out of elementary school and junior high school, coming out of junior high school into high school, out of high school into real life. And one of the main reasons why I want to run for State School Board of Education is because I believe in what you sow and you reap. And we watched the seed sown in education. This is not a dig at any teacher. This is on the system. And we're watching things happen on the tail end where the fruit is not what we were hoping for. And it's a big deal, not in every case, but in many, many cases, we're seeing it in real life, in real time, young people not being able to function and make moves in the life. And so that's a big deal to me. When it comes to finances, I've been a pastor for 25 years, and collectively I just thought, thinking about this the other day, somebody asked me about this question. We've probably dealt with, millions of dollars over the last 25 years that we've dealt with budgets and different things like that. So I think I'm fully equipped to be able to take on this task. And with this in mind, protecting the hearts and minds of the young people at the same time.
I'm not sure exactly what the attack on the system is, because the legislature, they pass the laws, they ask us to implement them. We then send them to the districts who are locally elected, who are your neighbors. I'm much less important on the state board than your local board members. You need to get involved in that. That's important. And so the systematic failure, I don't know. I don't see it. 84% of parents are satisfied with their schools.
Okay. I don't want to play pretend, because the proof is in the pudding. And when we watch young people graduate, and listen, when it's 10 times higher, the remedial classes that kids have to take in college when they get there, tells me that something is not adding up. And I'm not just talking about here in the state of Utah. This is a nationwide thing. We have a lot of nationalized standards here. I work with young people on the base that are 18 to 25 years old, you guys, that are lost. They're trying to figure it out. Things just aren't gelling, they're not clicking. So I'm not attacking the system. I'm saying let's shine a bright light on the system, and let's figure out what's going on there so that we can work together towards solutions to make it better, instead of presenting like it's not happening.
Here is another question from our audience here. And we'll be starting with Mr. Hall. How do you plan to help students who fell behind in their learning during COVID and need to catch up? Not just push them forward, but how do you help them catch up and then succeed?
I really think this is not just a teacher, student relationship effort. This really has to be a parental engagement effort. I think it's got to be a community-wide effort. A lot of people coming to me asking me questions like, hey, how can we get involved? They're grandparents. Some of them are empty nesters. They want to see the next generation impacted. I don't think you can take a single teacher to try to remedy that. I think that we have to have a collective community effort to try to get these kids caught up to where they need to be since everything that happened with COVID.
Last week, I had someone say to me, why is it the schools are producing so many problems with children? And I said, you have that backwards. Children come to school with issues, and we need to help them through those issues. And I get this all the time that somehow we felt when it comes to chronic absenteeism, this works back into the equation because we talk about the loss and the problems that are created by COVID, and then we have chronic absenteeism. When we come out of it, that's where we need to put our effort. We also need to make certain that kids can read. And that's what we're doing in this state. The most important skill, the one that gives you the greatest freedom in this life, is the ability to read. Frederick Douglass said that when he learned to read, he was no longer satisfied to be a slave. There's other types of slavery in our lives today. We can enslave ourselves to ignorance. We can enslave ourselves to drugs and alcohol and other harmful things. We can enslave ourselves to pornography. And let me just add to that I have done everything in my power to make certain that our children are safe. And yet we have people in this state who are attacking members of our board because they say that we don't care about kids and pornography. We have a lot of issues, but they're brought to school and we're ready to deal with them. We're ready to make a difference, and we have been. Thank you.
Okay, so my attempt to consolidate several questions. And about parents and how we can communicate better with parents. So how do you plan to engage with parents and discuss concerns with parents? What do you think the state board's role is in facilitating parental teacher relationships in schools? How can we encourage more parental participation in our schools? And I think it's Mr. Hall.
Okay. So this is near and dear to my heart. Parental involvement, parental engagement. I think it's so important. But I think it's going to come through messaging. I just think a lot of parents, to be honest with you, so when we jumped into this campaign, I had no idea everything that teachers really dealt with. They would track us down, they would cry, they would share their hearts with us. And teachers go through so much. They carry such a load, many of them working 55, 60 hours a week, dealing with troubled issues in the classroom and not having the support they need from administrators and staff. And as I heard this, it burdened my heart. And I believe with all my heart that if parents could know, if they could know what teachers are going through on a day-to-day basis, it would compel parents to want to be more involved, to get more plugged in, to want to be more a part. I just mentioned a few moments ago too, grandparents as well. I mean, I think we bypass that. There's a lot of grandparents that love their grandkids just as much as they love their kids. They love to be able to get involved and have a hand in what's going on too as well. So we have to, the messaging has to change. It's got to be constant and consistent and letting parents know. It's got to come from the top down too, that we need their help. We can't do this without their help.
One of the great challenges that we have right now is prosperity. Now that may sound like a strange thing, but I was still on the city council, and for 2 years in a row, in order to maintain our police department, we needed to raise wages 10 to 12% in both years, or else we were putting ourselves in a bind, which meant we had to raise taxes. Now, one of the things that's happening is we're having parents who are working 2 jobs, but they don't have the educational background to get a job to where they're having incredible struggles. We have the working poor, where they cannot afford a place to rent, or they've had financial trouble and they can't buy a home because they can't get the credit, and now their rates are real high. Prosperity is wonderful. And for me, who has a home, who was established years ago into a home, I see the struggles that young people have. And we talk about all the money that goes into education, and we've been treated very well. And we're at least middle class, and I appreciate that. But one of the challenges we have is that we cannot afford the cost of living. The cost of living is skyrocketing, and that's affecting our children. They're not having children. And if they're not having children, then we don't have students in school, and we need children to be economically prosperous. Thank you.
This one combines some questions together. So, do you believe in public education, or do you believe education should be privatized? And along with that, maybe give your thoughts on the Utah Fits All program, which is doing the privatizing of education. Okay.
Feels like there's several questions in there, so if I miss one, help me out. So Utah Fits All. I'm in the same place that I was 3 years ago, 2 years ago, 1 year ago, and this is it. I support parent choice with their children, whatever it may be. We have made some choices with our children. We did 1 year of homeschool with one of our children who needed some extra help. And my wife's a certified teacher, and we decided that was the best path. That was before she went back into the workforce. But here's one thing that is very important. I see a real problem with transparency and accountability. Because a lot of the laws that apply to public education don't apply to private schools. And that's good. They shouldn't apply to private schools because that's why they're private. They get to choose. But if you're now starting to use public money to fund private schools, that puts the private schools in a bad spot, especially if the government decides 5 years from now, 10 years from now, that now we're going to have accountability. Because the rights of conscience, that bill that was passed, I think 2 years ago, that bill does not apply to private schools, as it should not. It should not apply. Anyway, I'll pass, and then if I can come back.
Well, all my kids, I had kids go to homeschool for 1 year, private school, charter school, public school. I currently have 2 kids in public school. And I do believe that, I think our state constitution says that the parents are a child's first teacher and are responsible for their education. And so, and also God said, train up a child in the way he should go. And I believe that it's mandated from God that a parent would educate their child any way that they see fit. And so I'm thankful for those opportunities to be able to do that. And in many ways, I think it's good to see the money kind of following the student too along the way. And I do support the opportunity to be able to educate your child the way you want.
I love that quote from the Bible, train up a child the way that they shall go, and they shall not depart from it. I love that. I think it's wonderful, and I think it's wonderful that you use that. That's SEL. That's social emotional learning. And I'm all for that. Also, I think as a private school, that the curriculum, the Christian curriculum that you use, and the one associated with your faith, is wonderful. But they wouldn't allow us to use anything like that in the public schools. And so be aware that they may come back later.
Thank you. Okay, our next question, and we will start with Mr. Hall on this question. What are your thoughts of suggestions to do away with the Department of Education at the federal level?
It's a loaded gun, huh? Do I think we need the Department of Education at the federal level? No. I think that it should be left up to the states to decide how we want to educate in our own state.
I'm almost 100% in alignment with that, and that may make some of my more Democratic friends unhappy. But there is one instance in which the federal government needs to be involved, and that is in regards to civil rights. Without the federal government being involved in protecting the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, Little Rock, Arkansas, and the stuff in Mississippi, all that stuff becomes very difficult to deal with. And I'm just telling you that the Department of Education, I don't care if it's around, but there has to be something in place. And maybe that's the National Guard, because that's what Eisenhower used when he sent the troops to walk down the street, to walk into the front doors, and you had an armed National Guardsman or us. Maybe it was FBI or whatever, but whoever it was in the classroom to protect that student. And so there is time. There are times when the federal government does need to absolutely impose its will on the states. But that's not very often. I am a states' rights person, but we need to protect the Constitution. And there are times when the Constitution has not been protected because states' rights, and that can't be.
Thank you. Okay, here's one from our audience here. And Mr. Straight, we'll start with you. What would you do to address student lunch debts?
Okay, so we've talked about two of the programs that I'm suggesting we need to take a look at. Number 3 of the 5 is we need to look at the school lunch issue. I think that my wife said that they have $1,000 in debt at her school at this point, and it was at one point $4,000 this year. Here's what we need to come together. Doesn't matter, and this is like with the state board. We need to come together and do what's good for kids, because a kid can't learn if they're hungry. That is the bottom line. And another thing about that is that we have people that will vote that down. But the truth of the matter is, if we really care about getting our birth rate up and having more children, we need to put families in a better situation when it comes to lunch. In many countries, it's not even a thought. It's not even a second thought. You go to school, they feed you. It's part of the program. It's part of what's paid for. Now, Representative Clancy, who is a conservative, I'm a conservative. There is a conservative way to do this. But really, it's not just a conservative way, it's everybody's way. We can make this better for kids. We can help kids to have better experiences in school. Let's help the working poor.
So this is it can be a tricky issue. I think there's so much surplus in funds. And so this is my question. What would prevent some of those funds that have a lot of surplus, what would prevent some of those monies being reallocated and make their way back into the classroom, make their way back into the lunchroom? That's a question that all taxpayers need to be asking. And then we need to ask yourself this question: is it the responsibility of the school to take care of school lunches?
Next question. One of the most important things a state board member does is to set academic standards. Please tell us the specific standard from any subject that you think is written well, and or a specific standard from any subject that could use improvement. And I believe Mr. Hall, you're first.
I think we have a lot of good standards, but like I said, we have a lot of nationalized standards too as well. I believe it was 2023 in our ELA standards, or English Language Arts standards. I believe there was a motion to remove parts of speech. And I think we've got a lot of great standards. I think our math standards need some help, but to take away what needs to be done, what needs to be in the English language is just, it blows my mind. So that's one of the standards I think that we need to make sure we get back to what needs to be.
Well, this is one, because we agree on most things, but this is one where I disagree with you entirely. We actually have a member of the writing committee for the ELA standards in the room, and they are an ultimate professional. They are excellent teachers, and the reason I know that is because I've had several of my children in their class, and I respect this person as the English teacher. I also respect them as an expert in the field, and they're probably embarrassed now. But they're here in the room, and I can tell you that it is a 25-month process to get standards from one end to the other. And too often, we're doing too much nitpicking on all these standards. When we have wonderful standards coming now, we need input from the public. We need input from different points of view. I absolutely believe that. And I'm not just going to turn a blind eye, but sometimes we do way, way too much in questioning the expertise of our professionals. As a board, sometimes we do that with our state board, our staff. We have wonderful staff with lots of experience in education, and yet we come in too often thinking that we're the expert on everything, and we are not. We're there to administer, to make good policy, and we have lots of people to help us, and we do too little of getting the help we need.
Mr. Holman?
It's okay. It's okay.
Here we go. So we only have a couple of minutes left for our hour. So I was like anxiously thinking about what we were going to do. So we're going to do I think this last one is a great one. And I'm going to try to combine a couple of questions here. And Mr. Straight, you'll be first. So this one talks about your leadership style and what how you will represent the will of the people on the state school board. And I think also going along with that, how you would work on the state school board is if you have something you feel strongly about and somebody else on the board maybe doesn't feel the same way you do, how could you represent and help that issue be resolved if you maybe don't have everyone else agreeing with you? And how then would you represent the will of the people in doing that?
Okay. I have always been willing to engage. Unfortunately, not everyone feels exactly the same way in regards to engagement. I find that if I sit down with someone and we talk through a situation and we can actually come to an agreement to where both sides are satisfied in the solution that's presented. You cannot, and this is one thing I've learned over all my years. When I first went on the South Ogden City Council, the attorney for the city said, "Now, Mr. Straight, you have to understand something. It takes three to do anything. If it's just you, you have this much power. You are zero. If you don't learn to work with people, if you don't come to compromise, if you don't help each other to make good policy, you're not doing your job. Do your job, get it done, and go out and talk to people. Talk to the other council members." Now, I'm telling you, even at that, it took me 2 years to really figure it out. And after that, it was much easier because I thought, and here's what I thought: you're the smartest guy in the room. If you speak, they're going to listen and they're all going to agree because your ideas are so great. Well, guess what? That's not true. But we can come to great decisions if we work together.
Thank you.
Work together. I'm a face-to-face, heart-to-heart kind of a guy. And I'm all about sitting down and talking things through. Now, you may not always be able to come to a compromise, but that's where I think we need to stand on our convictions, and we need to remember who we represent, what we represent, and why we're there. We're there to on behalf of our students, on behalf of our parents, on behalf of our teachers. We need to make policy that would align with those things.
Okay. I just want to thank all the candidates for coming tonight. We're pretty much at the 1 hour mark here, and for all the audience members for coming, and those that we have online, we want to tell you thank you. Awesome. Also a huge thank you needs to go out to our host this evening, the North Davis Preparatory Academy was willing to host our debate tonight, and we're so appreciative and grateful to them for being able to do that. So we would like to wrap up with closing statements from both of you. And Mr. Hall, will you go first since Mr. Strang went first in the opening statement? And you both have 60 seconds to give us your closing statement.
I'm thankful for the possibility that I might have to serve on the State Board of Education. And it really, this has just really become my heart as we stepped into this campaign. But I really do believe I would not be doing this if I did not believe that we could create a culture that is empowering for parents, number one, and that is supportive and encouraging for teachers, and that is safe and successful, enriching academic excellence for students. And so I proceed with that. My heart is there. I want to see great things happen on our school board. I hope that you vote Rod Hall for state school board.
Recently, a delegation of Egyptian education leaders visited Utah. Their purpose was to study our career and technical education system. I was able to have dinner with them, as well as with several other board members. And in that visit time, I asked them the question, what was the most important thing that you saw when you were here in Utah, that you observed? And they said without hesitation, what you do for all children, what you do for the students at Farmington High School that is a regular public school is amazing. Our quality of education is amazing. We are doing amazing things. There are things that need to be improved. There's always things to be improved. But as Frederick Douglass said, it is easier to build strong children than to repair broken men. Thank you.
I just want to say thank you to everyone for coming tonight. Remind everyone that this live streamed on the Hinckley Institute's YouTube page, and that the link to watch the recording will be available this evening for you to be able to share that with friends and family if you would like to. Thank you to Mr. Stray and Mr. Hall for your willingness to run and to be a candidate. It's a huge job. It's a lot of work. It's expensive. And thank you to your families for letting you also run and be willing to serve. Thank you again to our audience and to North